I said I'd do this. It's basically like a little, if you're new to Warrior, if you're coming back to Warrior, I've got my Arms guide, I've got my Fury guide, but for the people kind of returning, I wanted to do like a little 11.1 survival guide, some trinkets to look out for, what's changing, that kind of thing. I don't know if this will be useful, but maybe. Maybe. You know. But basically, what really changed going from the warrior tree? Essentially, actually, an easy way to do this is I'll just show our live tree. This is what our live tree currently looks like, and this is what our new tree looks like. So you notice it's mainly this bottom row that's changed. So what essentially they did is they took endurance training and they moved it over here into reinforced plates. So now we just basically get 10% stamina for free. And then they took Cruel Strikes, moved it over to where endurance training was, and then moved to the weapon specializations over to where Cruel Strikes was originally on the tree. Now, what's important about this change is that every single warrior spec now has an additional benefit to their weapon specialization. And the arms ones is definitely probably one of the strongest. And that is the fact that you gain 4% more avoidance from these two talent points. So now Arms has now gone up. Previously, with the old tree, one of the bigger problems with Arms is that you weren't really able you're running something kind of like this, and you weren't really able to get endurance training because most of the rage generation from Arms comes from execute refunds and from your auto attacks. So not taking wild strikes, which increased your auto attack speed by 20%, was a massive DPS loss. So now, because they've moved endurance training over here, essentially what Arms gained in this little talent reshuffle was 4% more avoidance, massive, and 10% more stamina, which is crazy. And for Mythic Plus, they rebuffed Mountain of Muscle and Scars, so now it's also 5%. So if you were playing Arms, like at the start of the season, you're coming back to 4% more avoidance, 10% more stamina, and they doubled this, so it was 2.5, now it's 5% damage reduction. Arms is very, very tanky now. On top of the ability to take Ignore Pain, which is still not a very good button. Nobody's going to really recommend that. Arms is actually way, way tankier than it was coming into this season. And so here's what I'm going to do. Right in the description, there will be 4 talent builds. For the Arms ones from the Arms video already, this will be your Raid single target build, and this will be your AoE Mythic Plus build. I already have the codes. I have the codes here. All I have to do is just post them in the description. So that's what I'll be doing. And now what really changed for Fury? Fury probably received some of, outside of just basic tuning, some of the most amount of changes going into this season. And it's why we've kind of changed up our builds. So one thing they really did is they nerfed the crap out of Odin's Fury. Odin's Fury is now a very, very bad button. Even in AoE, we do not take Odin's Fury. And one of the problems is previously on live, we had this talent point here, which was called Titan's Torment, which essentially, whenever you hit Avatar, it just cast Odin's Fury for you. Odin's Fury has a 45-second cooldown, so between avatars, you'd be able to cast 2 Odin's Furies, and a third Odin's Fury at full strength would have been casted by Titan's Torment. With this change, and with the removal of Titan's Torment, and changing it so that Rampage cost reduction and Bloodthirst cooldown reduced, which isn't very good, it essentially means that not only did Odin's Fury get nerfed significantly because of how much damage we did to ads with the burst AoE, we also basically lost 33% of our casts. So Odin's Fury lost at base before all of the Nerebar Palace nerfs 33% of its value on top of the excessive nerfs it received throughout season 1. So it is simply something we're not going to take for anything. And with the removal of Titan's Torment, it is just way undertuned right now, and it needs some love for sure. But like arms, they also changed and they removed endurance training, threw it over here. Fury could get away with not taking wild strikes. It was only about a 30 to 40k DPS loss to gain 10% stamina. So normally, in most of my builds in Mythic Plus, I was always taking endurance training over wild strikes. But now that they've just given us endurance training for free, essentially, we just have some extra talent points, and that comes down to our new dual specialization for Fury. So it increases our damage done, and it increases our move speed. So now we actually have a base move speed increase. Also, we have the move speed increase from Frenzied Enrage, and depending on if you're using the gem, that gives you 2% move speed per Algiri gem color. You can have move speed from there too. So Fury is just generally, more thematically, a faster class from what it was before in the previous season. And that's mainly what we're looking at that's kind of changed with it. The other major change to Fury was the reversion of Reckless Abandon. Reckless Abandon used to, whenever you would cast a Rampage, your Raging Blow and your Bloodbath, or your Raging Blow and your Bloodthirst would turn into Crushing Blow and Bloodbath, and you get one charge of each. And it was actually, I really enjoyed that style of gameplay, where it's like, it was very simple too. You hit Rampage, you Crushing Blow, you Bloodbath, you Raging Blow, you Rampage. It was very simple, straightforward, enjoyable playstyle that I liked a lot. But they felt that because Reckless Abandon essentially dominated all types of content, they wanted to change it and revert it. So now when you activate your avatar, now you will be, now your Raging Blow and your Bloodthirst are just replaced with Crushing Blow and Bloodbath for the duration of your recklessness, which gives you a little bigger burst window, but is actually, because of the changes, just worse. So we're back to the anger management style of play. Now, you might have seen the Mountain Thane and the Slayer raid guides video on like our priority, what buttons to press, and it's with the removal and change of Reckless Abandon, Fury is way simpler. Now, it's literally, hey man, with anger management, Bloodthirst actually becomes our primo button. Bloodthirst does the most damage. So basically it's like, hey man, don't overcap on rage and press. Basically, they basically dumbed it down a little bit. If you have enough rage to press Rampage, press Rampage. If you can't press Rampage, press Bloodbath, and if you can't press Rampage, press Bloodthirst, and if you can't press Bloodthirst, press Raging Blow. That's it. That's the whole spec. There's nothing to consider. There's no, you can overcap Rage if you're an Execute with 2 points in Vicious Contempt with Bloodbath. There's none of that anymore. It's just, can you press Rampage? You press it. Otherwise, you're pressing Bloodthirst and Raging Blow. There will probably be some form of min-max where you just don't want to overcap your rage. So as long as you're not overcapping, you can press whatever you want and you stay enraged. But we're moving over to the anger management playstyle, which is one of the things that I think might be kind of difficult for this upcoming raid, is anger management more so than anything else needs and requires uptime. ARMS does have anger management as well, but it doesn't feel nearly as impactful as Fury's anger management by reducing the cooldown of your Blade Storm and your recklessness. The other problem anger management actually brings, which you'll face if you're going to be playing Fury in raid. Also, I should mention, in terms of Fury being played in raid, as of the current sims, it's like 30k behind ARMS. Like, it's close. If you don't want to play ARMS, if you hate ARMS, you don't have to play it. It is very, very close. You can find this sim spreadsheet in the Warbreaker Discord. But it feels way more impactful, but the problem is because of how Slayer works, you're naturally going to have more cooldown reduction on your Blade Storm than anything else. So you can't actually, like, put Blade Storm with anything. So what you're going to end up doing is just spam casting Recklessness on repeat and just Blade Storming whenever it's up, and then you just kind of have Avatar there. It's not a playstyle I don't mind anger management when we're playing Ravager, like in our Mountain Thane dungeon build, because when we're playing this in our dungeon build, when we Ravager, it also reduces the cooldown of Recklessness. We don't have any additional cooldown reduction in our hero tree. So whenever you get your cooldowns back, you're always able to cast Ravager with Recklessness. So it feels decent, the flow is decent. But something that's going to feel very weird if you play Slayer in Raid is that you're going to be desyncing literally all of your cooldowns almost all of the time. You'll be sending Bladestorm by it first, you'll be sending Recklessness, unless it's like close to another cooldown, essentially by itself, just for the rage generation to cast more rampages to get more recklessnesses out. Recklessnesses, that's fun to say. But then you're also going to be left in this awkward situation where you're just kind of pressing Avatar, and it's like, oh cool, I have Avatar. But you might not have a Bladestorm within that Avatar window. You might not have your Recklessness fully up in that Avatar window. It's very weird. It's a very awkward play style, and I personally do not enjoy this version of anger management Slayer specifically because of how it massively desyncs your cooldowns, and it never really feels like you're building or setting up for anything. Not a fan. But that's mainly what's changing for Fury. It's just anger management is just better than Reckless Abandon, and Odin's Fury is bad, so we're just playing Berserker's Torment. They nerfed Thunderous Words by 10% increased damage from your bleeds, so we're not even taking that. And the main reason we're not even taking these lower talent points is most of our capstones are actually really bad. Like, a lot of them are not very good in relation to everything else on our tree, which is why we end up in the situation where almost all of our points are put into this talent row because every single point is throughput. When we move over to our AoE build for Fury, you'll notice we don't take Cruel Strikes, but that's just because Execute isn't nearly as much damage for us. They did buff Execute damage by 50%. However, Slayer is far more focused, around Execute, making this a more worthwhile talent, whereas for Mountain Thane, unless we have nothing else to press, we basically don't press Execute. The other thing that is kind of awkward about Mountain Thane, because of the Thunderous Roar nerf, because we're not playing Odin's Fury, and we're also not really playing Bloodborne because of the Thunderous Words nerf, and because we're not playing Thunderous Roar. Now we're playing Spear in Mythic Plus, which feels really bad. I personally do not like Champion Spear. I really wish they would have given us Ancient Aftershock from Night Fate instead. I like that ability way more. I like the visuals of it way more. But the highest simming build currently for Mythic Plus is this anger management, and we're taking Unbridled Ferocity and Depths of Insanity Mountain Thane build with Spear. I don't know. This build's going to feel very weird to me. Personally, I'm probably just going to be playing, unless Fury somehow gets a buff and it's way, way better, I'm just going to be playing Collosus AoE, is what I'm going to be playing in Mythic Plus. You have a ton of avoidance. You have 9% avoidance through this talent and your passive. You have 10% more stamina and 5% damage reduction. It's just so, so good. But now that we've talked over some of the changes coming in, I'll have all these talent builds in the description. Let's talk a little bit about trinkets and some things you might want to focus on. First and foremost, let's talk about the Bis Trinkets for both Arms and Fury. Eye of Kezan. This thing comes from the last boss in the raid, Gallywix, and it is insanely potent. This thing is very, very, very good, and almost everybody that I know is probably going to be going for it. This thing is crazy. It's going to be hard to get. If they do give us a Dinar-like system, we still haven't really heard what's going to happen with that. This thing is probably going to be one of those things you really go for, because everybody's going to want it, and then if people use their Dinar or whatever on this item, it will make it way, way nicer, because basically everyone's going to want this thing. Like, if Mastery's any good at all, you're going to want this thing, because it just gives you a ton of primary stat. The value of this trinket, interestingly enough, might fall off as the patch goes on, because as fights get shorter and shorter in length, especially the first probably like 4 or 5 bosses, as those bosses get shorter and shorter in length, the Eye of Kezan gets a lesser and lesser value. So another trinket I would also have a look at is the Reverb Radio from Rick Reverb. It's just haste. Haste is good for arms. Haste is good for fury. It is a passive proc, just like Eye of Kezan, and it is something that if nobody else really wants or is reaching out to grab for, this thing can be pretty good. The other thing that recently got buffed is the Z's Thug Hotline. This comes from the second to last boss. It just does damage, kind of like this. It doesn't give you primary stat, but its primary stat does damage. So these are a couple raid trinkets you can look out for. Eye of Kezan, obviously being our BIS, and our other best in slot is going to be House of Cards. Realistically, the only other classes that might be going for this is probably, let's say, I don't really know the exact timings of the other classes. Maybe Sug Rogue, Ret Paladin, Unholy DK, Frost DK are all probably going to be looking at this thing because it's a 1.5-minute cooldown, works with their cooldowns, and mastery is good for all of them. So that might be something they're looking at. Maybe Assassination might want it, but Assassination wouldn't want it because Assassination's on 1 and 2 minute cycles, so they want 2-minute trinkets. So these are really the raid trinkets you're going to be looking for. They're all very, very good. And like I said, getting your hand on an Eye of Kezan is going to be difficult early. This thing is crazy good. So our other raid options, being Reverb Radio and Thug's Hotline, are decent choices. They're not the best, right? They're not our best, but they're decent. They're pretty good choices. Should these drop and nobody else try and grab these. Now, these are our raid trinkets, right? Now let's look at our dungeon trinkets. These are trinkets that you can actually put a little time into to farm yourself. That'll probably have some longevity and some value in being the best trinkets we can really get outside of raid. Most of the value in the items we're getting are coming from raid, tier sets, special items, special two-handed weapons. A lot of our BIS is basically coming from the raid. But what can we get from Mythic Plus, especially in the early weeks? And let's start with the improved Seaforium Pacemaker. This thing drops out of Operation Floodgate, which will be a Mythic Plus dungeon. So you'll be able to get this. You'll be able to upgrade it to get it at a hero track. It's going to be very valuable. A passive trinket like Eye of Kezan. But this thing is probably worth your time to focus on farming. Personally, I wouldn't try and farm weapons or armor or anything in specific. If you have limited time, farming these trinkets are going to be the most bang for your buck. So that's going to be Operation Floodgate for this thing here. It just gives you passive crit chance. And with it, it's basically 30 seconds of a crit buff that you get every 60 seconds. So it's a 50% uptime trinket that just gives you crit. It's really good. It's maybe not the best for Fury, because Fury prefers haste and mastery, but there aren't really any other good trinkets to go for, unfortunately. They're all tank or 2-minute, and they don't really fit very well. So for arms and Fury, improved Seaforium at Operation Floodgate is definitely going to be the way to go for farming. The other trinket, which is probably just going to be another passive trinket here, is the Sigil of Algiri Concordance. It's from the Rookery dungeon. All this thing does is it summons a guy, and the guy does damage. These are just basically passive damage trinkets. There are no really, really good dungeon trinkets that you can farm specifically that are going to massively impact what you're doing. So, because most of the good stuff comes from the raid, these are 2 dungeon trinkets you can look at farming and putting your time into, and it'll probably be the most bang for your buck. There are some other potentially good trinkets. However, there is a problem with their acquisition, and that is the Funhouse Lens and the Suspicious Energy Drink. Both of these trinkets come from delves. So, first and foremost, these trinkets are going to be locked to if you loot them from a delve, they're going to be locked to, I believe, champion track at most. I don't remember if they're nerfing delve loot, so don't fully commit on that. But the Funhouse trinket is mainly good for arms, because arms like crit or haste. It's a 1.5-minute trinket, so you can use it on cooldown with your avatar. So this is something that's decent. Normally, I think the higher end of Delve loot is like you can get the map that gives you like a hero track piece at like the 610 equivalent, but most of the Delve loot is going to be dropping at normal, and that's actually not that big of a deal. So if you get these, it's actually pretty good, mainly because normal trinkets can be upgraded to the current 619 equivalent, which the 619 equivalent is basically where you would stop upgrading things anyway, because anything above 619 would cost gilded crest, and that mainly is something you're going to spend on crafted gear and on on crafted gear and on upgrading myth track pieces while doing mythic raiding. So this thing is actually not bad to get. I don't know exactly where it drops. All of these are a set of delve trinkets. Same thing with the mechanical core amplifier and the suspicious energy drink. They are just passive trinkets that do stuff. I do not know exactly. I don't know if they're probably just like a specific random trinket from the new delves in the goblin area of patch 11.1. So I don't think you can farm the old delves for these, but they can be upgraded to 619 equivalent. If you do get these, I would recommend farming out 613 in every slot first. That way you're not wasting a bunch of heroic crests upgrading this through that normal to heroic track. That way you can upgrade it to free to 613 and then cap it out at 619 using 30 of your heroic crests. And that goes the same for the suspicious energy drink. It is just a passive trinket. It gives you mastery, and then the other mechanical amplifier just gives you stats. They're all just passive things that give you stats that you might be able to get from delves if you're having trouble getting into groups or don't have people to play with, or just want something to work towards on your own if your group is just kind of off doing their own thing, right? But these are definitely things that are valuable. Funhouse Lens, not nearly as valuable for Fury, because if you get a crit proc instead of a haste activation, you're not going to be happy about it. It's just worse for that. So for Fury, I would once again recommend Improvised, Seaforium, Sigil of Algiri Concordance from the Rookery, or the Suspicious Energy Drink, or the Mechanical Core Amplifier if you get it from the Delves. But we're mainly going to be looking at these two trinkets here. Anyway, that's just a little bit of a rundown on kind of what's changed, what to look forward to, things you can actually start focusing on. I don't know. I personally don't know too much about the patch outside of raid and balance and tuning and some of these items and trinkets. Mainly because I like going into stuff fresh. I like enjoying it. I'm going to be doing all the quests and hooking up with my cartels, because I really, really like, and I'm really going to enjoy the theme of this patch. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Because I feel like one of the things I've really felt from this patch more than anything else is as players, not only are we really interested and are really looking forward to it, the devs seem really interested, really looking forward to it, really proud of the work they've done. And as a player, I really feel that. I feel the devs' enthusiasm, Seeing a guy like Scarzard on Twitter, or he's on, or he recently did an episode with Max and Dratnos, you really get to feel and enjoy the passion these guys, the men and women of the WoW team have really put into this patch. The bombastic music, dude. This is going to be one of the few World of Warcraft patches or even expansions that I walk into it with game volume all the way up, and I'm not listening to my own music at all. I am way in, and I really hope you guys enjoy this patch as much as I feel like I'm going to. But yeah, anyway, here's your little survival guide, whatever. In the description, I will have I'm just going to put all of this in the description, but here will be your Slayer build, Arms Slayer build, Arms Collosus build, and then one for Fury and one for Mythic Plus for Fury, just in case you want to mess around. Like I said, they're very, very close in terms of actual damage and performance. The main thing is probably going to be, because of how anger management really requires your uptime for Fury, as well as how the bosses are designed, it's going to be an arms tier. At least for me, but for people who aren't trying to push world ranks and cutting edge and that kind of thing, you can just basically play whatever you want. Blizzard has done a pretty goddamn good job in terms of balancing by like base numbers, but we'll have to actually see how everything rolls out. So I hope to see you in the lands of the Undermine, and you better not be snooping around my cartel. If you're snooping around my cartel, might have to bust some heads, all right? All right. I'll see you there, and hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.